Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling somewhere. A little grimy. You're standing in the middle of an ancient street where the air smells like smoke, sweat, and something you definitely don't want to step in. Yeah, welcome to a time before soap, before deodorant, before anyone even thought of toothpaste. You're about to explore how humans stayed alive and somehow socially acceptable when showers didn't exist and perfume was basically public armor. And don't worry, you probably won't survive this smell either. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know exactly when and where you're getting grossed out. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander back thousands of years, sandals squelching through ancient mud streets, and realize you're surrounded by people who have never seen a bar of soap. That's not an exaggeration. Soap in any form we'd recognize didn't really exist until the Babylonians stumbled on a crude version around 2800 BCE. They mixed ash with fat and water to make a kind of sludgy cleanser, mostly for laundry, not skin. You'd have to wait a few millennia before anyone thought washing the body might be a good idea. You walk past a row of reed huts along a riverbank, Mesopotamia, maybe, and see someone rubbing sand on their arms, scraping away the day's grime. That's it. That's their bath. Scholars still argue whether this was ritual purification or just human desperation. Either way, you can practically feel the grit against your own skin. A woman nearby sprinkles oil on her hair and combs it through with a bone pick. The oil isn't for shine. It's to trap lice. Once they're stuck, she'll scrape the mess off and start again. That's early pest control for you. Oddly enough, she smells faintly of herbs and smoke. Probably better than most people in her village. You look toward the river. A man is washing himself downstream from where someone else is doing laundry. And a few meters farther, someone's dumping waste. The water ripples brown and silver in the sun. Civilization's first plumbing system, right there in the open. The strange thing is, people didn't necessarily think they were dirty. To them, dirt was just life. The idea of clean was tied to ritual, not health. You bathed before entering temples or performing sacrifices, not because you were afraid of germs, they didn't know those existed, but because you wanted to be pure before the gods. Dirt could mean sin, not disease. You duck under the shade of a clay wall and watch a priest perform a cleansing ritual. He pours water from a carved jar, chanting softly as he sprinkles it over his arms and head. The water smells faintly of rose petals. Perfume was sacred long before it became cosmetic. It was an offering to the divine and a barrier against decay. Somewhere nearby, a child runs barefoot through puddles, laughing. You realize this is daily life. No running water, no toilets, no toothpaste. But people still smiled. They still cared about how they looked and smelled, within the limits of what they knew. A quirky detail. Archaeologists once found a 4,000-year-old comb in a Mesopotamian grave, etched with cuneiform that literally says, "May this comb drive out the lice of the hair and beard." Even back then, humans were already making jokes about hygiene. Some things never change. You sit on a broken clay jar and think about how far humanity's come. We take soap for granted, but once upon a time, the height of luxury was oil and a scraper. Imagine trying to explain exfoliation to someone from 2500 BCE. They'd nod politely, then hand you a lump of ash and a bone comb. You move closer to the river again, the air thick with the smell of smoke and animals. A group of men are pouring oils over each other's backs, scraping it off with bronze blades. It looks almost ritualistic, like bathing and massage mixed together. In a sense, it is. They believed oil drew out impurities and protected the skin. No lather, no foam, just a gleaming sheen of civilization. There's a strange comfort in realizing that even without soap, people tried. They experimented. They cared about cleanliness in their own ways. And while you're standing there watching a line of people scrub and scrape beneath a hot orange sky, you can almost understand them. Maybe hygiene has always been less about being spotless and more about trying to feel human. Again, at the end of the day, you take one last look at the river, glinting like molten bronze under the sunset. The smell still makes you gag a little, but somehow, the world feels alive in its imperfection. Civilization, you realize, started here, in sweat, oil, and dirt. Tomorrow, you'll wander into the next era, the one that decided smell was everything. But for now, you let the sound of the river and the buzz of ancient life lull you toward sleep. You wake up surrounded by the scent of incense, spices, and something faintly floral, but underneath it all, there's that unmistakable human musk. You're standing in the heart of an ancient city, and it's glorious, chaotic, and a little too fragrant for comfort. Welcome to the birthplace of perfume, where people didn't get rid of bad smells, they just layered better ones on top. You wander through a bustling Egyptian market, where merchants shout over each other, peddling jars of scented oil and crushed lotus petals. The air feels thick, heavy with desert heat and sandalwood smoke. Every other stall offers something divine: myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon oil, resin. People here don't just wear fragrance, they practically bathe in it. Scholars still argue whether the Egyptians invented perfume purely for ritual use or whether it was already part of everyday fashion. Either way, you can tell they took their scents seriously. A woman passes by you, her braided wig glistening with beeswax and perfume, cones melting slowly atop her head. As the fat melts, it releases aroma throughout the day, like an ancient, slow-burn deodorant. You can't help but think that's both genius and kind of disgusting. Further ahead, men in white linen skirts fan themselves with palm fronds. They're not sweating any less than you are. They're just used to the blend of dust and divine aroma. You pass a perfume maker grinding resins with a mortar and pestle. He hums softly as he mixes oil and bark, muttering a prayer to Nefertum, the god of scent. The smell hits you, sweet, sharp, and strangely comforting. Cleanliness here is sacred, but not in the way you expect. The Nile was their lifeline and their bathtub. Egyptians bathed often. But it wasn't about removing germs. It was about maintaining spiritual order. Dirt was chaos. To be clean was to be in harmony with Ma'at, the divine balance. They even had makeup with antibacterial properties, though they didn't know it. The kohl around their eyes, made of lead salts, accidentally protected them from infection. You could say they looked good and stayed alive. Though modern dermatologists would probably faint at the ingredients list. You walk toward a grand house made of sun-baked mud brick. Servants pour water from alabaster jars as their master rubs his skin with fine sand. You notice he uses a bronze scraper afterward, echoes of Mesopotamia, but more refined. His body glows under the sun, oiled and perfumed. Even the dogs smell like myrrh. And yet, not far from this luxury, you find peasants by the river, doing the same thing with river mud instead of perfumed sand. Cleanliness wasn't about class, it was about ritual and the rhythm of daily life. Everyone, rich or poor, needed to smell like they belonged to this ordered universe. Oddly enough, while Egypt celebrated fragrance, their streets didn't always match their elegance. You tiptoe past a corner where refuse lies half buried in the sand. The smell here is a sharp reminder that sanitation hadn't quite caught up to style. It's easy to perfume your body, but how do you perfume an entire civilization? You think of how much scent shaped ancient identity. Perfume wasn't just luxury, it was life, love, and death. Mummies were anointed with the same oils people wore daily, as if to tell the gods, hey, we tried to smell decent on the way up. You imagine the funeral rites, priests chanting, pouring oils over linen-wrapped bodies, the aroma filling the chamber until even death itself smells sweet. One particularly curious fact: archaeologists once uncovered jars of 3,000-year-old perfume in a tomb near Cairo, and when they opened them, the fragrance was still there. Faint, musky, but intact. That's the power of resin and oil, a scent that outlived empires. You walk back into the city streets, and a sudden gust of wind brings a swirl of mixed aromas: baking bread, incense, sweat, animals. It's overwhelming, but in its own way, alive. You start to realize that clean isn't a universal concept. It's cultural. It's symbolic. The Egyptians didn't try to eliminate human scent. They celebrated it, elevated it, gilded it with the smell of gods. Someone offers you a linen cloth dampened with lotus water. You wipe your face and feel instantly refreshed, like you've been accepted into this perfumed world. For a brief moment, you smell divine too, though probably still a bit like dust and camel. The sun begins to set, turning the white stone temples into sheets of gold. Smoke curls from offering fires, carrying perfume to the heavens. You feel a strange sense of awe. Even here, thousands of years before soap, humanity had already found its own kind of beauty in the balance between scent and sweat. As darkness falls, you look over the river. Reflections of torchlight shimmer across the surface, and the air grows cooler, gentler. You can almost forget the smell. Tomorrow, you'll drift west across the sea, where baths weren't sacred anymore. They were sport. But for now, you breathe in one last trace of lotus and myrrh, and it's almost enough to make you forget you haven't bathed in weeks. You blink and find yourself surrounded by marble and sunlight. The air hums with chatter, and the faint sound of splashing water echoes through vast courtyards. You've arrived in ancient Greece, the birthplace of philosophy, democracy, and public bathing. Here, hygiene isn't just about smelling good, it's practically a social sport. You wander through a Greek gymnasium, but don't let the name fool you. It's not just a place to lift weights. It's where people exercised, debated, bathed, and occasionally showed off how glisteningly clean they could be. Naked bodies shimmer with olive oil under the afternoon sun, muscles gleaming like polished statues. You can almost feel the heat radiating off the white marble floors. A young man hands you a small bronze tool, shaped like a curved spoon, the strigil. You watch as he scrapes oil and sweat from his skin with it, flicking the residue into a clay jar. That's hygiene Greek style. No soap, just oil scraping and a lot of confidence. You give it a try, dragging the strigil down your arm. The mixture of dust and oil slides away, leaving your skin surprisingly smooth. You almost feel civilized. Scholars still argue whether these rituals were purely hygienic or a sort of purification rite tied to Greek ideals of beauty and balance. Maybe both. After all, to the Greeks, a healthy, oiled body was a reflection of a healthy soul. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Wasn't a biblical idea yet, it was Greek gym philosophy. You step into the latron, a shallow bath chamber where attendants pour cool water from large amphorae over the athletes' bodies. The sound of splashing echoes like soft rain. Some laugh, others debate politics, and one older man quotes Homer between rinses. Bathing here is less private routine and more public conversation. Imagine your daily shower as a TED Talk with everyone naked and opinionated. Oddly enough, they didn't consider soap necessary. They preferred olive oil. It moisturized, protected from the sun, and made skin gleam like marble. In a way, they invented the world's first luxury skincare routine. As you stroll through the open courtyard, you pass rows of stone basins and benches where women chat while combing, scented oils into their hair. Children play with water jugs, splashing each other under the watchful eye of a stoic marble Athena. The whole place smells faintly of herbs, thyme, mint, maybe a little lavender, and the tang of sweat. You can't help noticing something. Everything here feels intentional. Dirt is an enemy, but not one to be feared. It's something to be artfully removed. You glance at a mural on the wall depicting Hercules bathing after battle, his club resting beside the tub. Even heroes need a rinse. And then you hear it, music. You follow the sound to a corner of the gymnasium, where a group of musicians play lyres, beside steaming pools. Bathers lounge in warm water, sipping diluted wine and gossiping about politics and poetry. It's like a spa mixed with a town hall. You settle near the edge, dipping your hands into the warm pool. The water feels like silk. A servant walks by carrying a tray of oils and sponges. You watch him drop herbs into the bath, rosemary and sage maybe. They used natural disinfectants long before anyone knew what a bacterium was. Accidental science at its finest. A quirky detail surfaces in your mind. Historians once found remnants of ancient Greek bathing sponges with traces of honey and sea salt. That's right. People literally exfoliated with dessert ingredients. You smile. Humans have always loved making skincare unnecessarily delicious. As the sun begins to set, the gymnasium glows gold. The air is filled with laughter, water, and that faint olive aroma. The scene is strangely peaceful. You realize that these people, despite having no germ theory, no soap factories, and no mint toothpaste, probably felt cleaner than most modern humans after a 10-step skincare routine. You catch fragments of conversation nearby. Talk of a new Roman innovation. Great aqueducts and bathhouses spreading across the empire. You can almost sense the cultural torch passing from Greek marble to Roman stone. The Greeks built beauty. The Romans will build plumbing. You linger for a moment longer, watching a young athlete polish his bronze mirror. He smiles at his reflection, turns, and nods at you as if to say, "Remember this, cleanliness isn't just survival, it's art." As night falls, the baths empty out. The marble floors glisten under torchlight. You can still smell olive oil and salt in the air, but now it's softer, calmer, almost sleepy. You imagine the city settling down for the night, every rooftop echoing with cicadas. Somewhere, a philosopher is probably still talking about the soul, while his skin glows like a polished statue. You close your eyes and listen to the faint drip of water. The ancient Greeks didn't invent soap, but they did invent the feeling of being clean enough to dream. You wake up to the echo of splashing water and the faint scent of hot stone. When your eyes adjust, you realize you're standing in the heart of the Roman Empire. Steam curls around mosaic walls. Torchlight glimmers on bronze fixtures, and marble pillars rise like columns of mist. You're in a therme, a Roman bath complex, and trust me, this place makes every modern spa look like a rusty bucket. You walk down the corridor, your footsteps soft against the tile floor. The air vibrates with murmurs, laughter, and the clink of amphorae. Roman baths weren't just for hygiene, they were the social media of their time. People came here to gossip, strike deals, flirt, and occasionally wash. Hygiene was just the cover story. A servant waves you toward a room shimmering with heat, the caldarium. You step inside and it's like walking into a sauna kissed by sunlight. Steam fogs the air, blurring everything into gold and silver hues. Men recline on marble benches, rubbing oil on their shoulders, while slaves scrape it off with strigils, the same way the Greeks did. But here it's industrialized cleanliness, mass production of bathing. You can almost hear the pipes beneath the floors. Warm air and water pumped through complex underground systems circulate through the bathhouse. Romans called it hypocaust heating, basically the world's first underfloor, central heating. A mainstream historical fact worth noting. These massive bathhouses were architectural masterpieces, powered by furnaces and aqueducts that fed them with miles of flowing water. Its civilization literally heated from below. You move to another chamber, the tepidarium. The temperature drops to something more humane, and the air smells faintly of rose oil. Statues of Venus and Apollo watch you from alcoves. Their marble eyes seem to say, "Relax, mortal." Cleanliness is divine business. Then comes the frigidarium, the cold plunge, a vast pool gleaming under skylights. You hesitate, dip a toe, and instantly regret it. It's like being kissed by a snowstorm. The cold jolts your senses awake, your breath catches, and suddenly you're very aware that your ancient self has no towel. A scholar might tell you that Romans believed this. Hot to cold transition purified both body and spirit. It was discipline disguised as luxury. Scholars still argue whether the baths were meant to symbolize moral purification, or if they were just glorified social clubs with nice plumbing. Either way, they worked, both for hygiene and empire-building morale. You wander through the hallways lined with mosaics of dolphins, nymphs and gods holding jugs of water. There's something hypnotic about it, the repetition, the shimmer of tiles, the laughter echoing off stone. You can almost hear the heartbeat of Rome itself in the rhythmic dripping of water. In a corner, a barber scrapes a man's face with a small bronze razor, while another trims nails. This is the tonstrina, the grooming station. The Romans took personal care seriously. They even had early versions of tweezers, perfumes, and toothpicks made of silver. Hygiene meet vanity. A quirky detail slips into your mind. Ancient Romans used urine, yes, actual human urine, as a cleaning agent. They collected it in public jars, called piss pots, and used the ammonia to bleach clothes and even whiten teeth. Imagine smiling after that. Somewhere, a Roman dentist probably said, "Say ah," and rinse with yesterday's leftovers. You stroll into a quieter chamber. A senator in a crimson-bordered toga discusses politics while attendants pour warm water over his shoulders. Another man nearby massages scented oil into his scalp, muttering about the latest gladiator match. Every corner feels alive. Baths, debates, bargains. Rome's entire rhythm seems to pulse here. Above you, beams of sunlight filter through steam, painting the air in shifting gold. It feels sacred somehow, as if the Romans made a temple for cleanliness. You notice a small inscription carved into a marble slab near the pool. Mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body. You smile. 2,000 years later, the phrase still echoes in gym slogans and wellness podcasts. As the evening nears, torches flicker on, their flames reflected in the water. The heat fades into soft warmth. You step outside into the courtyard where cool air greets your damp skin. The sky burns orange, and beyond the arches, the city hums. Vendors shout, chariots rumble, fountains sparkle. You can smell bread, smoke, and soapless bodies glowing with oil. You realize that for Romans, hygiene wasn't private, it was public ritual. It connected people, displayed power, and even defined status. The elite bathed daily, the poor in smaller communal baths. Everyone shared the same dream, to wash away dust, sweat, and maybe a bit of mortality. You glance back at the grand arches, watching the steam curl into the darkening sky. You can almost hear the soft hiss of water, the faint laughter echoing through the walls. Somewhere, a philosopher might say that cleanliness was Rome's way of pretending death didn't exist if the body gleamed. Maybe it could live forever. The last light fades and the bathhouse glows like a lantern. You take one last deep breath, warm air, mineral-rich and slightly metallic, and step into the night. You can still feel the smoothness of your skin, the warmth lingering under your feet. The Romans didn't just wash away dirt, they washed away the day. And as you walk into the streets of twilight Rome, the sound of trickling fountains follows you like a heartbeat. The faint rush of water becomes a distant memory as you blink again, and suddenly, the world feels colder, rougher, and darker. You're standing on a muddy street lined with timber houses and thatched roofs. The smell hits you first. Wood smoke, wet hay, something sour and earthy. And then something worse. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where hygiene took a long vacation and forgot to come back. You shuffle past a cart piled with onions and turnips. A pig snuffles through a puddle, splashing filth on your boots. Somewhere, a woman empties a bucket out of her window. You instinctively step back, too late. The contents hit the street with a slap, running down toward the open drain. You realize, with horror, that this is the drainage system. No pipes, no sewers, just gravity and regret. Scholars still argue whether medieval people were truly dirty, by their own standards, or if our modern disgust is just hindsight. But either way, your nose knows the truth. The Middle Ages had a complicated relationship with cleanliness. You wander into a public square. A small wooden sign hangs crookedly from a doorway. Bain Common, the bathhouse. You duck inside, half expecting marble floors or at least warm water. Instead, it's dimly lit by candles, with wooden tubs filled with steaming water. A few people soak quietly, their clothes hanging on pegs nearby. Couples bathe together. Friends share tubs. It's strangely intimate, almost cheerful. You sit by one tub and dip a hand in. The water's warm, maybe too warm. Someone nearby murmurs about the healing properties of herbs and flowers mixed into the bath, chamomile, sage, rosemary. Another boasts about a new imported spice that supposedly kills bad air. No one mentions soap. You remember, they often used ashes, crushed herbs, or even fermented animal fat as substitutes. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Medieval. Europeans didn't entirely abandon bathing. They just bathed differently. After the fall of Rome, public baths declined, but private tubs, steam rooms, and hot springs remained popular, especially among the wealthy. Monks bathed on strict schedules, sometimes once a week, sometimes only a few times a year. You wonder if that counted as devotion or punishment. A young apprentice sits nearby, scrubbing his hands with sand and vinegar to remove grime. You watch as he shakes his fingers dry and wipes them on his tunic. It's crude, but effective. In a world without germ theory, clean often just meant visibly less disgusting. You overhear two men whispering about how frequent bathing weakens the body. There it is, the medieval myth that would last for centuries. The belief that hot water opened the pores and let in disease. Bathing too often was practically considered flirting with death. It's ironic, really. People feared the cure more than the sickness. A quirky detail you can't forget. Medieval bathhouses often doubled as brothels. The line between clean and sinful was blurry. Moral panic spread faster than the plague, and soon, bathhouses were shut down or condemned. Hygiene became not just a question of health, but of holiness. You step back outside into the chill night. Smoke drifts through the streets, and the only light comes from flickering torches and the pale glow of the moon. Somewhere a bell tolls. You follow the sound to a monastery on the edge of town. Inside, the air smells of beeswax and parchment. Monks chant softly, their voices echoing off the stone walls. You find the washroom, a long stone trough with rainwater trickling through it. A monk gently rinses his hands before evening prayer. For them, cleanliness was spiritual, washing before touching holy text, before meals, before sleep. They couldn't control disease, but they could control devotion. Scholars still debate whether this shift from public hygiene to private ritual marked progress or regression. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was survival dressed as faith. You notice a monk mixing ashes and herbs in a small clay bowl. Creating a gritty paste, he rubs it between his palms, smiling faintly as if soot itself could wash away sin. You think back to the Romans and their marble baths, to the Greeks and their oils. Civilization keeps changing the tools, but the goal stays the same, to feel pure, to feel human. Outside, the village hums with rough laughter and clattering carts. A barber surgeon sharpens his blade under a street lantern. offering bloodletting and tooth-pulling for a copper coin. You pass him quickly. Hygiene in this age feels more like triage. The air is heavy with wood smoke and superstition. People believe in miasmas, bad air-carrying disease, so they burn herbs, hang garlic at their doors, and pray. A merchant walks by, waving a bundle of lavender under his nose like a shield. Somewhere in the darkness, a rat squeaks. You both flinch. You remember a story whispered in history books. When the Black Death came, people thought baths spread the plague. They sealed themselves indoors, let grime build up, and wore perfume to mask the stench of fear. You imagine the irony, fleeing death by marinating in filth. As the night deepens, you stand by a fountain in the town square. The water trickles gently, reflecting the faint moonlight. You cup some in your hands and splash it on your face. It's cold and metallic, but refreshing. You realize that even here, even now, the instinct to wash never disappears. You tilt your head back, listening to the distant toll of a monastery bell. Somewhere, a monk whispers a prayer for purity. Somewhere else, a peasant scrubs his hands raw with ashes. You can almost hear time itself sigh. And as you breathe in the smoky, earthy air, you can't help but think, cleanliness, like faith, is something humans keep chasing, even when the world makes it almost impossible. The morning light leaks through stained glass, scattering reds and blues across the stone floor. You blink, and the noise of the medieval village fades into silence. The air now smells faintly of wood polish, beeswax, and soap. You follow the scent, winding through narrow cobblestone alleys until you reach a small workshop. Inside, a woman stirs a bubbling pot over a fire, humming softly. You've arrived in the early Renaissance, the rebirth not just of art and science, but finally of cleanliness. You lean closer to the pot. The thick, creamy mixture smells faintly of animal fat and herbs. She's making soap, the real kind, the kind that lathers. Olive oil, lye, ashes, salt, and water. Simple ingredients. But together they mark a revolution that most people today take for granted. She pours the hot liquid into a wooden mold, waits and smiles as it cools into solid bars. You watch her wrap one in linen and tie it with a bit of string, luxury Renaissance style. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the 14th and 15th centuries, cities like Marseille, Savona, and Aleppo had become famous for soap production. Entire industries grew around this new obsession with clean skin and scented oils. For the first time in centuries, bathing was fashionable again, and this time, no one was accusing it of sin. You take a piece of that soap and hold it up to your nose. It smells like lavender and sunlight. For a moment, you can almost feel centuries of filth wash away in your imagination. Don't drop it, the woman teases, and you laugh quietly. Humor survived the dark ages, apparently. As you step back outside, the street bustles with merchants, scholars, and artists. The Renaissance city is alive with motion. Water flowing from fountains, perfume sellers shouting prices, and young apprentices carrying buckets to fill their masters' baths. The streets are still dirty, sure, but there's a new attitude here. People believe in progress again. You can sense it in the air. Cleaner, sharper, ambitious. You wander into a barber's shop. It's not just for haircuts anymore. Barbers have become surgeons, dentists, and early skincare experts all rolled into one. A young man reclines in a chair as the barber shaves his face with a gleaming razor. The blade moves with surgical precision. You can almost hear it whisper through the foam. Hygiene here has become ritual, a mark of refinement, not just survival. Soap softens the spirit, the barber says, grinning. You nod. Maybe it does. Outside, you spot a scholar sketching near a fountain. He's studying the way water moves, how it arches and falls. Hydraulics, he mutters. The poetry of pressure. You all realize he's not just admiring cleanliness. He's trying to understand it. The human urge to master water, to bend it to our will, is older than civilization itself. A quirky little detail drifts through your thoughts. In Venice, perfumers started selling aromatic gloves scented with rose and ambergris. People wore them not just for style, but because they believed the scent protected them from disease. Fashion meets pseudoscience, history's favorite collaboration. You follow your nose to a nearby apothecary, shelves grown under jars of dried flowers, resins, and oils. The apothecary, with a long gray beard and ink-stained fingers, explains how rosemary boiled in. Vinegar cleanses the air and wards off the plague. He's not entirely wrong. Both have mild antiseptic properties. Scholars still argue whether these proto-disinfectants made any real difference, or just smelled nicer than death. As the day fades, you step into a noble's home. A wooden tub sits in the corner, lined with linen and half filled with rose water. Candles flicker, their flames mirrored in the surface. You can almost imagine the lady of the house bathing here, her maid pouring warm water over her shoulders while music plays softly from a nearby lute. It's intimate, ritualistic, but above all, beautiful. Cleanliness has become art again. From the balcony, you can see the city's skyline glowing under the sunset. Churches, workshops, canals. Somewhere out there, Leonardo da Vinci is probably sketching the perfect water wheel. The world is turning toward innovation, and hygiene is catching up. Still, old habits die hard. The poor wash less often, drawing water from shared wells that sometimes double as garbage dumps. Disease still lurks in the corners, waiting. You remember that this very age of beauty will soon face plagues again. But for now, people believe in soap, in science, in the simple miracle of feeling clean. As the evening deepens, you sit by a fountain where water glints under the moonlight. You dip your hands in, feeling the cool rush against your skin. The sound is soothing, a constant heartbeat beneath the city's noise. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls, and a group of women laugh as they rinse laundry in the public trough. You close your eyes, listening. The world feels lighter than the medieval gloom, yet still imperfect. Halfway between superstition and science, dirt and discovery. But in that in-between space, humanity is learning again how to wash away its fears. The water ripples against your fingers, the scent of lavender still clinging faintly to your hands. You realize progress doesn't always start with invention. Sometimes it starts with the quiet courage to get clean again. The scent of lavender fades, replaced by something sharper: salt, tar, and wood smoke. You blink, and the Renaissance city dissolves into a churning sea. The wind howls in your ears, gulls scream overhead, and you're suddenly on the deck of a wooden ship somewhere in the 17th century. The age of exploration, the era of discovery, and ironically, the era of some of the filthiest humans to ever roam the earth. You grip the railing as waves crash below, drenching you with salt spray. The deck is alive with shouting sailors, some hauling ropes, others chewing stale bread, one scratching furiously under his shirt. You don't even want to guess why. A barrel nearby leaks something foul, and the air smells like salt mixed with rot and sweat. Welcome to life at sea, where bathing is more fantasy than habit. A grizzled sailor laughs at your disgust. Bath? He snorts. That's what the ocean's for. He points at the rolling waves, and then at the barrel of drinking water. You bathe, you waste rations. You stink, you're alive. Scholars still argue whether sailors' poor hygiene was born of necessity or superstition. Some believed washing at sea angered the spirits. Others feared getting sick from cold seawater. Either way, the result was the same. Ships smelled like salted death within a week of leaving port. You make your way below deck, ducking under low beams. The air is thick and stale, smoky, humid. Dozens of hammocks sway in rhythm, sailors snoring, coughing, dreaming of dry land. Rats scurry across the floorboards. You hear the drip of condensation and the faint splash of water seeping through seams. If the Romans had built plumbing into ships, maybe these men wouldn't smell like despair and mackerel. You notice a sailor washing his face with vinegar from a small tin cup. Keeps the lice away, he says proudly. You're not convinced. Another man uses sand to scrub his teeth, which might be cleaner than nothing, though his grin suggests otherwise. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. During long voyages, sailors could go months without a proper wash. Clean water was too precious. Bathing was rare, and changing clothes was considered optional. Disease spread fast: scurvy, dysentery, typhus. Hygiene wasn't just unpleasant. It was lethal neglect. The ship rocks as you climb back to the upper deck. A young cabin boy pours seawater over the wooden boards, scrubbing them with a broom. Swabbing the deck, he says with a grin. You realize that the ship itself gets more cleaning than its crew. The captain appears, a stern man with a plumed hat and gloved hands. His coat gleams and his boots are spotless somehow. You can smell faint perfume beneath the salt. The officers, you learn, kept themselves relatively clean using scented oils, powdered wigs, and fresh linens. The illusion of cleanliness mattered more than the reality. A quirky detail floats to mind. Sailors sometimes wore earrings made of gold, believing the metal could absorb disease, or even pay for their burial if they drowned. Hygiene and superstition danced a strange waltz on these ships. The captain invites you to dine. You sit at a small table under lantern light as salted meat. Hard biscuits and something unidentifiable are served. You watch as the men eat with unwashed hands, wiping grease onto their sleeves. Wine and rum flow freely, not for pleasure, but because alcohol was safer to drink than the water, stored in barrels turning green with algae. You glance at the horizon. The sun dips below the waves and the sea glows orange and gold. For a fleeting moment, the world looks beautiful, even clean. But then the smell returns, that heavy, human tang of salt, sweat, and unwashed fabric. You realize the ocean's vastness has never felt more claustrophobic. Later, under a sky freckled with stars, the sailors gather on deck, singing in hoarse voices. You sit beside a barrel, breathing in the cool night air. The sea wind almost, masks the smell of humanity gone too long without soap. One sailor passes you a pipe. "You get used to it," he says, puffing. The stink, the sores, the lice. You stop noticing. That's the trick. You look up at the stars, glittering like shattered glass. Somewhere across the sea, new lands await, untouched shores, new worlds. But you can't help thinking about what the explorers will bring with them. Dirt, disease, and the very habits that kept them alive long enough to spread them. Scholars still debate whether the explorers' voyages marked progress or plague. Maybe both. For every map redrawn, a million microbes crossed oceans unseen. As dawn breaks, the crew stirs. The smell of smoke and salted meat fills the air again. You dip your hands into a bucket of cold seawater and splash your face. It stings your eyes, but for a brief second you feel awake. Almost clean. You lean against the railing as sunlight spills across the waves. The sea, vast and endless, glitters like a mirror. It reflects not purity, but persistence, the human refusal to give up, even when covered in salt, sweat, and the ghosts of soap long forgotten. And as the ship sails onward, creaking and alive, you think about how far we'll go, not just to find new worlds, but someday, to rediscover the simple peace of washing off the journey. When you open your eyes again, the salty sting of sea air fades into the dry crackle of straw. You're no longer aboard a ship. You're standing in a crowded street somewhere in 18th century Europe. The cobblestones are slick with rain, horses clatter past, and people rush by in powdered wigs and silk coats. The air smells faintly of perfume and sewage, a combination that somehow sums up the century perfectly. You glance around. A nobleman struts by, face powdered white, cheeks flushed with rouge. His gloved hands are spotless, his lace cuffs immaculate. But you notice something odd. The perfume around him is so strong it almost chokes you. Cleanliness, it seems, has become something you wear, not something you do. This is the age of perfume and pretense, where soap and water took a backseat to cover it up and pretend. You wander past open drains and piles of waste, all while nobles discuss the latest Parisian scents. Hygiene in this world is a luxury of illusion. A mainstream historical fact bubbles up in your mind. After the decline of public baths, 18th century Europeans relied heavily on dry cleaning methods, powders, perfumes, and linen changes. Bathing was rare even among the rich. King Louis XIII, the so-called Sun King himself, reportedly bathed only a handful of times in his life, preferring to mask odor with clouds of ambergris and rosewater. You can practically smell the history, and it's not pleasant. You duck into a perfume shop to escape the stench outside. Inside, crystal bottles glimmer like jewels, each filled with liquid sunlight. The perfumer greets you warmly, his fingers stained with oils and tinctures. He explains how scent is distilled: rose petals soaked in alcohol, musk from deer glands, resin from exotic trees. You realize this isn't just hygiene. It's chemistry disguised as luxury. He offers you a small vial. "Civet," he says proudly. You hesitate, then sniff. It's intense, musky animal. He grins. Collected from the glands of a civet cat, worth its weight in silver. You smile politely, but your stomach disagrees. Scholars still argue whether perfumery truly replaced hygiene or simply delayed the inevitable rise of actual cleanliness. Either way, people of this age smelled expensive, not fresh. You step back into the bustling street. A beggar child splashes in a puddle near a horse trough. For the poor, cleanliness means surviving mud and filth long enough to see another day. Laundry hangs from upper windows, dripping water onto the heads of passers-by. A woman wrings out a shirt and laughs. You realize, for them, washing is defiance, proof that life continues however grimy it gets. You follow the sound of laughter to a public square. A man stands on a crate, shouting about new bathing machines imported from England, wooden carts, rolled into the sea so that modest could bathe privately. People whisper in disbelief. Naked in the ocean? One gasps. Scandalous. Another murmurs. You grin. Progress often starts with outrage. Nearby, a doctor gives a lecture about the benefits of cold water therapy. He claims it strengthens the body and clears the mind. You recognize the faint shimmer of modern science beneath his words. The idea of cleanliness as health, not just vanity, is making a comeback. Slowly, awkwardly, but inevitably. A quirky detail tickles your brain. Fashionable. Europeans carried pomanders, small, metal balls filled with spices and herbs to ward off bad air. They'd hold them to their noses in crowded streets, or during outbreaks of disease. The irony, of course, is delicious. They were breathing through tiny perfume filters, still convinced smell itself caused sickness. As dusk settles, you wander into a candlelit salon. Musicians play softly as nobles sip wine and gossip. The scent of wax, tobacco, and powdered wigs fills the air. You overhear a discussion about miasmas and vapors, the invisible forces people still blame for illness. The gentleman in satin insists that frequent bathing dilutes the body's humors. His companion nods solemnly. You resist the urge to laugh. Yet amid all the perfume and powdered nonsense, something shifts. Doctors begin publishing pamphlets about hygiene, plumbing, and cleanliness. Soap makers advertise their wares as cures for disease, not just for odor. You can almost feel the world waking up from a centuries-long nap, stretching its arms, and realizing, oh right, water exists. You find a small inn for the night. The basin in your room holds a few inches of water, lukewarm and cloudy, but it will do. You dip your hands in, splash your face, and watch the grime swirl away. The feeling is small but profound. In a world obsessed with appearances, you've found the quiet satisfaction of real clean. Through the open window, you can see lanterns flickering on the streets below. The city hums with life, laughter, and the faint clink of glass. Somewhere, perfume still drowns out the stench of humanity, but you can sense that something's coming. A change. A revolution, not of politics, but of plumbing. As you dry your face on a rough linen towel, you catch your reflection in the window, tired but lighter. The century of powder and perfume is nearly over, and soon, soap and water will reclaim their throne. You smile, because even though they didn't know it yet, the 18th century was scrubbing its way toward the modern world. One scented glove and awkward bath machine at a time, you wake to the soft rush of water. Not from a river or rain, but from pipes, real working pipes. You blink and realize you've stepped into the 19th century, the age when humanity decided enough was enough. The perfume-scented denial of the past gives way to something new. Soap, sanitation, and an almost obsessive desire to be clean. You wander down a cobblestone street in London. It's early morning and the city is already alive with noise. Chimneys belch smoke into the gray sky, carriages rattle past, and a faint hum of progress fills the air. Yet beneath it all, there's a sour, familiar smell, the stench of waste and industry mingling in the fog. The year is somewhere around 1850, and you've arrived just in time for the great stink. The River Thames glistens nearby, brown and sluggish, carrying more than just water. You cover your nose instinctively. Even the Parliament buildings reek, forcing lawmakers to hang scented cloths over their faces while they debate sanitation reform. The irony is thick enough to chew. A mainstream historical fact floats up as you walk. In 1858, the heat of summer turned London into a biohazard. Human waste, dumped directly into the Thames, began fermenting in the sun. The smell was so unbearable that Parliament finally funded a massive underground sewage system designed by engineer Joseph Bazalgette. That system, you recall, still serves the city today. You glance at the workers laying bricks beneath an open trench. They look exhausted, covered in mud and sweat, but their work hums with purpose. Cleanliness is no longer just about appearances, it's about survival. For the first time, hygiene has become a public duty. As you follow the workers' voices, you pass a soap factory on the edge of town. Steam billows from tall chimneys and the air smells faintly of animal fat and lye. You step inside, curious. Rows of workers, mostly women, pour liquid soap into molds, stamping each bar with the company's emblem. A foreman shouts orders over the hiss of boiling vats.
More tallow!
Watch the caustic soda. You pick up a fresh bar of soap. It's rough, gritty, and smells like lavender and smoke. Still, there's something deeply reassuring about it. The idea that this humble, chalky rectangle might keep millions alive feels almost heroic. Scholars still argue whether the 19th century's obsession with hygiene was born from genuine health concern or pure industrial pride. After all, governments discovered that clean cities also meant productive citizens. Soap wasn't just about health anymore. It was about national image. Cleanliness became a virtue, a moral statement, a badge of civilization. You stroll past posters on a brick wall. Clean hands, clean heart, godliness is next to cleanliness. Even children's books preach the gospel of soap. Somewhere along the line, washing became a sign of being a good person. You can't help but chuckle. The pendulum, it seems, has swung from no baths ever to wash or perish. But not everyone is on board. A quirky detail catches your
Here, an elderly gentleman in a top hat.
muttering about how excessive washing weakens the body. He insists. Cold air is more dangerous than filth, wrapping himself in wool and refusing to bathe more than once a month. You grin. Even in an age of progress, old habits die dirty. You wander toward a grand bathhouse rising from the mist. Its columns gleam like marble, and the sound of splashing echoes from within. Inside, warm steam envelops you, carrying the faint scent of eucalyptus. People of all classes mingle here. Merchants, soldiers, clerks, each scrubbing away the grime of the industrial world. You sink onto a bench and watch as a boy pours hot water from a copper jug, his reflection shimmering on the tiled floor. A man beside you strikes up conversation, boasting that his doctor prescribed weekly bathing to strengthen the lungs. You smile, realizing how revolutionary that idea once was. The body isn't just a vessel to decorate, it's something to maintain. Outside, the rain begins again, washing soot from rooftops. The city seems to sigh in relief. You pass a row of new houses, fitted with flush toilets, a marvel of plumbing that's quickly becoming a necessity. You can't help but grin at the irony. Centuries of filth, perfume, and superstition, all undone by a few clever pipes and a porcelain seat. As evening falls, gas lamps flicker to life. You find yourself standing by the Thames again, watching its surface ripple under the glow. It's cleaner now, though still far from perfect. The city hums around you, restless and alive, dreaming of progress. You think about how far humanity has come, from scraping with stones to scented gloves, from rivers of waste to rivers of water flowing underground. Cleanliness, once a luxury, is slowly becoming everyone's right. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. A woman hangs freshly washed linens from her window, their white fabric glowing softly against the darkening sky. For the first time in history, the scent of soap drifts through the air, not to hide filth, but to celebrate its absence. You breathe in deeply, feeling something you haven't felt in centuries of travel, a sense of relief. Finally, the world doesn't just smell clean, it is. And yet, deep down, you know this isn't the end. Because humans, being humans, will always find new ways to complicate the simple art of staying clean.